Jake Morrison stumbled through Terminal B at Logan Airport, his broken arm throbbing beneath the Navy sling that cut across his gray wool coat. The crowd pressed around him like a living thing, voices blurring into white noise. And suddenly the air felt too thin, too sharp. He ducked into the nearest men's restroom, his good hand gripping the cold porcelain sink as his chest tightened. 6 months, 6 months since Alex died, and the grief still ambushed him in crowded places like this. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in sickly yellow, and Jake's reflection stared back hollow-eyed, stubbled from 3 sleepless nights in Maine. His uncle's funeral had been brutal, not just the loss, but sitting in that small-town church surrounded by relatives who still called his relationship with Alex his roommate situation, even after 8 years together. The same people who'd never visited, never called, never acknowledged that Jake had been planning to propose before the accident took everything away. Now he was late for his flight back to San Francisco, where a room full of city planners waited for his presentation on affordable LGBTQ+ housing. The project that Alex had helped him dream up, sketched on napkins during late-night diner conversations about making the world safer for kids like they'd once been. The panic attack hit like a freight train. Jake's vision tunneled, his breath coming in sharp gasps that echoed off the tile walls. He fumbled for his phone with his good hand, but the screen blurred. His passport slipped from his coat pocket without him even noticing, clattering across the floor. This was how Alex found him 6 months ago, hyperventilating in their kitchen after Jake came home from another failed family dinner. But Alex wasn't here anymore to talk him through it, to remind him to breathe. Cameron Ellis had just finished washing his hands when he heard the labored breathing from the corner stall. His military training kicked in instantly, recognizing the signs of acute stress response, the same sounds he'd heard in barracks overseas, the same panic that had consumed him during his discharge hearings when "don't ask, don't tell" finally caught up with his carefully hidden truth. He moved toward the sound without hesitation, his black dress shoes silent on the polished floor. A passport lay abandoned near the sinks, the blue cover worn from travel. The man in the corner was young, maybe late 20s, with dark hair and the kind of exhausted grief that Cameron recognized from his own mirror after leaving the Air Force. Cameron crouched down slowly, keeping his voice low and steady, the way his first sergeant had taught him to handle soldiers in crisis. "Hey there, I'm Cameron. Can you hear me?" The stranger's eyes found his, wild and unfocused. "Count with me. 4 in, hold for 4, out for 4. That's it?" Cameron's Scottish accent, softened by years in America, seemed to cut through the panic somehow. Jake latched onto the voice like a lifeline. This stranger with kind eyes and an expensive suit was talking him through breathing exercises, not asking questions or making assumptions, just helping. "That's better. You were safe. What's your name?" Cameron asked when Jake's breathing began to normalize. "Jake," he managed, his voice hoarse. "Thank you. I don't usually..." Cameron picked up the passport from the floor and glanced at the name. Jake Morrison, San Francisco address. "No explanation needed. Happens to the best of us." He handed the document over carefully. "You heading somewhere important?" As they left the restroom together, both men realized they were late for flights that would take them in different directions. But something had shifted in those few minutes. Cameron had seen Jake at his most vulnerable and hadn't turned away. Jake had accepted help from a stranger and found himself steadier for it. They walked toward the departure gates together, and neither man was quite ready to let the other disappear into the anonymous crowd of travelers. Sometimes the most meaningful connections begin not with attraction, but with one person seeing another person's pain and choosing to stay. At the Dunkin' Donuts near Gate B12, Cameron watched Jake fumble with his coffee cup, the injury making simple tasks frustrating. Without being asked, Cameron steadied the cup while Jake managed the lid with his good hand. "Architect," Jake said when Cameron asked about the blueprints poking out of his bag. "Working on affordable housing in the Mission District?" Cameron's eyebrows lifted with genuine interest. "That's important work. I consult on diversity and inclusion policies, mainly for tech companies in Seattle. Different approach. Same goal of creating spaces where people can exist safely. Jake studied Cameron's business card, noting the specialization in LGBTQ+ workplace inclusion. You know, we're probably fighting the same fight from different angles. I'm designing housing specifically for queer youth aging out of foster care. Too many of them end up on the streets because shelters aren't safe. Cameron nodded, pulling out his tablet to show Jake some statistics he'd compiled. 40% of homeless youth identify as LGBTQ+, but they're only 7% of the general population. Your housing project could literally save lives. The conversation flowed naturally into the deeper currents of their work. Cameron described consulting with a major Seattle tech firm whose trans employees were leaving due to hostile bathroom policies and dead naming in company systems. Jake shared his frustration with city planners who couldn't understand why LGBTQ+ housing needed different safety considerations, community spaces, and proximity to affirming healthcare. Both men had spent their careers translating queer survival into language that straight institutions could understand. I'm actually presenting at the National LGBTQ+ Housing and Inclusion Summit next month, Jake mentioned, then paused. Wait, you said you specialize in inclusion policy. Are you? Cameron smiled. Speaking at the summit, different track, but yes, small world. They compared schedules, discovering their sessions were scheduled for the same afternoon in different cities, Boston and Denver. Classic conference planning, Cameron laughed. Put all the queer content at the same time so straight people can skip it entirely. The gate announcer interrupted with news that Jake's flight was delayed due to weather in San Francisco. Cameron's Seattle flight showed similar delays. Instead of groaning about the inconvenience, both men felt something like relief. Jake was dreading the presentation he wasn't ready for, still struggling to focus since Alex's death. Cameron was tired of traveling, tired of being the only queer person in corporate boardrooms, explaining why pronouns mattered to executives who saw inclusion as a checkbox rather than survival. Jake found himself talking about Alex for the first time since the funeral, how they'd met at a community garden in the Castro, both trying to grow tomatoes in terrible soil, how Alex had been a social worker who understood trauma in ways that made Jake feel less broken, how the affordable housing project was originally Alex's idea, born from seeing too many queer kids with nowhere safe to sleep. Cameron listened without offering empty comfort or trying to fix anything, the way someone does when they understand that grief isn't a problem to be solved. Cameron shared his own story gradually. Growing up in Glasgow until his family immigrated when he was 15, the culture shock of American masculinity, joining the military because it seemed like the most American thing he could do, then spending years terrified that someone would discover his secret. The relief when "don't ask, don't tell" was repealed, followed by the devastating realization that coming out would still end his career due to existing prejudices, the discharge that felt like freedom and exile at the same time. I spend most of my time now helping companies understand that inclusion isn't charity, Cameron said, watching travelers hurry past their small table. It's survival for people like us, and it's good business for them. But sometimes I wonder if I'm just making it easier for them to exploit queer labor without actually changing anything fundamental. Jake nodded, recognizing the exhaustion of being constantly educative, constantly grateful, constantly proving their humanity was worth accommodating. The storm outside intensified, and the delay stretched longer. Neither man minded. For the first time in months, Jake felt like himself again, discussing work that mattered with someone who understood both the mission and the piano. Cameron found himself relaxing in a way he rarely did with new people, not performing competence or respectability, just talking. They discovered a shared love of old architecture, terrible reality television, and the specific exhaustion of being the only queer person in professional spaces where their expertise was constantly questioned. When Cameron mentioned his struggle with hypervigilance in crowded places, a lingering effect from military closeting, Jake realized the bathroom intervention hadn't been coincidental. Cameron had recognized crisis because he'd lived through his own. They were both carrying invisible injuries from growing up different in places that punish difference, and their professional lives were attempts to build the safety they'd never had. Sometimes healing happens not through fixing what's broken, but through finding someone else who understands why it broke in the first place. The departure board updated again, showing another hour delay for both flights. Instead of frustration, Jake felt grateful for time he hadn't planned on having. Cameron suggested they find a quieter gate where Jake could spread out his project materials without elbowing fellow travelers. In the less crowded area near Gate B28, Jake carefully unrolled his architectural sketches, his injured arm making the process awkward, but manageable. Cameron helped hold down the corners, studying the detailed plans with genuine fascination. "This is brilliant," Cameron said, pointing to the community kitchen spaces Jake had designed. "Most housing projects isolate people in individual units, but you've created natural gathering points." Jake's face lit up as he explained the intentional design choices. Laundry rooms positioned to encourage interaction, a community garden on the roof, meeting spaces that could transform from workshops to social events. Alex always said architecture is just psychology in physical form. If you want people to build chosen family, you have to design spaces where that can happen organically. Cameron pulled out his laptop, showing Jake data visualizations from his inclusion research. "Look at this. Companies with dedicated LGBTQ+ employee resource groups see 30% better retention rates and higher productivity metrics. Your housing design is basically creating that same supportive ecosystem, but for daily life instead of work life." Jake leaned closer, studying the graphs, and Cameron caught a faint scent of cedar and coffee from Jake's sweater. What if we combined these approaches, housing that connects to employment resources, career development, community building all in one integrated system? The conversation evolved into collaborative brainstorming. Cameron's experience with corporate inclusion policies could help Jake understand how to present his housing project to city officials who thought in business terms rather than social justice language. Jake's architectural knowledge could help Cameron design physical workspaces that supported the inclusion policies he developed. They began sketching together, Jake's precise technical drawings merging with Cameron's flowcharts and policy frameworks. Jake found himself talking about the panic attacks that had started after Alex's funeral, how crowded spaces triggered overwhelming grief responses. Cameron shared his own struggles with hypervigilance, the way military closeting had trained him to constantly scan environments for threats that might expose him. Both men had developed professional expertise partly as armor against personal vulnerability, and recognizing that in each other created deeper intimacy than either had expected from an airport encounter. "I keep thinking I should be over it by now," Jake admitted, unconsciously rubbing his broken arm. "Alex died 6 months ago, but sometimes grief hits like it just happened. My family keeps asking when I'll start dating again, like healing runs on their timeline." Cameron was quiet for a moment. "After I left the military, I spent 2 years refusing to get close to anyone because I was so tired of hiding. Different situation. But that feeling of people expecting you to bounce back according to their schedule. I understand that." Cameron's hand moved closer to Jake's on the small table between them, close enough that Jake could feel the warmth without actual contact. "Your grief isn't something to get over. It's something you learn to carry differently. And that housing project, it's not just work. It's building the world you and Alex dreamed about. That's not moving on. That's moving forward with intention." Jake felt tears threaten and didn't try to stop them. No one had told him it was okay to still love Alex while building something new. The attraction between them had been building quietly throughout their conversation, but now it shifted into something more complex. Cameron was drawn to Jake's passionate dedication to his community work, the way his grief had deepened rather than diminished his empathy. Jake found himself captivated by Cameron's combination of strength and gentleness, the way he'd stepped into crisis without hesitation. When Jake's hand trembled slightly from fatigue, Cameron steadied it briefly, and the contact sent electricity through both men. "I need to tell you something," Cameron said carefully. "What happened in the bathroom earlier? I recognized what you were going through because I've been there. Military closeting gave me my own flavor of PTSD, panic attacks, hypervigilance, the whole package. I'm not trying to fix you or save you, But I want you to know that what you're feeling isn't weakness. Jake met Cameron's eyes directly. Thank you for not making me feel broken. Alex used to say that too, but I haven't been able to believe it until now. The boarding announcement finally came for Cameron's Seattle flight, but instead of relief, both men felt disappointment. They had found something rare, a connection that was simultaneously professional collaboration and personal recognition. Jake realized he didn't want Cameron to disappear into his business trip. Cameron found himself considering ways to extend their conversation beyond the airport. They exchanged contact information, ostensibly for the Housing Summit collaboration, but both men knew it was more than professional networking. As passengers began lining up for Cameron's flight, he turned back to Jake with an expression of careful vulnerability. I know this started with me helping you through a difficult moment, but I want you to know it became something else entirely. You've reminded me why the work we do matters, and that's a gift I wasn't expecting today. Jake smiled, the first genuine smile he'd managed since leaving Maine. You've reminded me that healing doesn't have to be a solitary project. That's worth missing a few flights. Sometimes the most profound connections happen when two people discover they're fighting the same battles from different directions and choose to face forward together. Cameron's boarding group was called just as the gate monitors began flashing urgent updates. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport was shutting down due to an unprecedented November storm, winds exceeding 70 miles per hour. Cameron's flight was not just delayed, it was canceled entirely. The gate agent announced that the earliest replacement flight wouldn't depart until the following afternoon, assuming weather conditions improved. Other passengers groaned and rushed toward customer service counters, but Cameron felt something unexpected. Relief mixed with disappointment. Jake was gathering his architectural plans when he overheard Cameron's situation. His own San Francisco flight was still scheduled to depart in 2 hours, weather at SFO remaining clear. The logical choice was obvious. Catch his flight, get home, prepare for Monday's crucial presentation to the City Planning Commission. The affordable housing project had been stalled for months due to bureaucratic resistance. And this presentation could determine whether dozens of LGBTQ+ youth would have safe housing or remain on the streets. But as Jake watched Cameron navigate the rebooking chaos with quiet frustration, he found himself remembering Alex's final voicemail. They'd fought that morning about Jake missing another family dinner for work, Alex accusing him of choosing professional success over personal relationships. The last thing Alex said before leaving for what would become his fatal drive was, "Sometimes I wonder if you'll ever choose people over projects." Jake had never forgiven himself for not calling back immediately. Cameron was attempting to maintain professional composure while explaining to his Seattle client that tomorrow's consultation would need to be rescheduled. The company was implementing new transgender inclusion policies following several discrimination incidents, and delayed guidance could result in more employees facing harassment. Cameron's work had real consequences for real people, and Jake could see the weight of that responsibility in his shoulders. "What if you didn't go to Seattle tomorrow?" Jake asked. Approaching Cameron's position in the customer service line, Cameron looked confused. "The storm's going to last through tomorrow anyway. What if we both stayed in Boston tonight, and I changed my flight to Seattle with you? I could present my housing research at your consultation session. Show how physical space design supports inclusion policies." Cameron stared at him. "Jake, you can't miss your San Francisco presentation. That project is too important." Jake felt a strange certainty settling over him, the same feeling he'd had the night he and Alex decided to move in together. The project will survive a 1-week delay, but what we're building here, this collaboration between housing design and workplace inclusion, this could change how cities and companies think about supporting LGBTQ+ communities. That's bigger than my single presentation. Cameron's expression shifted from confusion to something deeper. "Are you sure I don't want you sacrificing your work for mine?" The decision felt simultaneously impulsive and inevitable. Jake found himself at the airline counter, explaining to a tired customer service representative that he needed to cancel his San Francisco flight and book passage to Seattle for the following day. The change fees were substantial, and his project manager would be furious. But Jake felt more grounded than he had in months. Alex had been right about choosing people over projects, but maybe the choice didn't have to be binary. Cameron insisted on splitting the hotel room costs, then looked embarrassed about suggesting they share accommodation. "I don't want you to think I'm assuming anything," he said carefully. "This is just practical, given the circumstances." Jake appreciated the clarity. "I trust you. Besides, I'm not ready for anything complicated romantically, but I am ready for partnership, professional and personal. There's a difference." Cameron smiled, understanding exactly what Jake meant. At the Marriott near Logan, they found themselves in a room with 2 beds and a small table where Jake spread out his housing plans again. This time, Cameron contributed policy frameworks that could help Jake's project navigate city bureaucracy more effectively. They ordered room service and worked until midnight, developing an integrated approach that addressed both physical safety and systemic inclusion. Jake's architectural expertise complemented Cameron's policy knowledge in ways that surprised both men. Cameron fell asleep first, exhausted from travel and emotional intensity. Jake sat by the window, looking out at the storm battering Boston, and called his project manager to explain the delay. The conversation was difficult, but his team was more understanding than expected. "Take the time you need," his manager said. "Alex always said you work too much anyway. Maybe this collaboration will make the project stronger." Jake realized this was the first major decision he'd made since Alex's death that felt like growth rather than survival. For 6 months, he'd been going through the motions of living, fulfilling obligations and meeting deadlines without engaging his heart. Tonight, choosing to help Cameron and explore their collaborative potential, he felt like himself again. Not the version of himself from before Alex died, but someone new who had integrated loss into purpose. Cameron woke in the middle of the night to find Jake sitting by the window, sketching by lamplight. Instead of architectural plans, he was drawing people. Figures gathered in community spaces, faces showing connection and safety. "Can't sleep?" Cameron asked softly. Jake looked up with a small smile. "Too excited to sleep. I think we might be building something important here." Cameron joined him by the window, watching the storm begin to calm, and knew that sometimes the most significant journeys begin with canceled flights and changed plans. The morning brought clear skies and a different energy between them. Jake had woken up feeling more rested than he had in months, despite sleeping in an unfamiliar hotel room. Cameron was already dressed and reviewing his consultation materials over coffee from the lobby. Their flight to Seattle wasn't until afternoon, giving them time to refine their collaborative presentation approach. Jake felt nervous about entering Cameron's professional space, but Cameron's excitement about their partnership was contagious and reassuring. On the plane to Seattle, they sat together naturally, continuing their work conversation while other passengers dozed or watched movies. Cameron showed Jake the tech company's current inclusion policies, pointing out gaps where physical workspace design could make a significant difference. Jake sketched quick floor plan modifications on cocktail napkins, showing how gender-neutral bathrooms could be positioned for accessibility and privacy, how open office layouts could include quiet spaces for employees experiencing stress or discrimination. Seattle surprised Jake with its beauty, mountains visible despite the overcast sky. Cameron's hotel was downtown, within walking distance of Pike Place Market and the company they'd be consulting with the next morning. Over dinner at a restaurant, Cameron recommended. They refined their presentation materials and discovered they both tended to overthink professional situations when they cared deeply about outcomes. Jake admitted he usually presented alone because collaboration felt too vulnerable. Cameron shared that he'd spent his entire career being the only queer person in corporate meetings, making shared expertise feel revolutionary. The tech company consultation exceeded both men's expectations. Cameron's policy expertise provided structure for inclusion initiatives, while Jake's architectural perspective offered concrete solutions for creating physical environments that supported those policies. The company's executives, initially skeptical about bringing in additional consulting costs, became engaged when they saw how workspace design could prevent discrimination incidents and improve employee retention. Jake felt energized by translating his community housing insights into corporate settings. After the successful presentation, Cameron suggested they walk through Capitol Hill, Seattle's historically LGBTQ+ neighborhood. Jake was struck by the visibility of queer life here, rainbow flags and inclusive signage more common than in many parts of San Francisco. They stopped at a community center where Cameron had volunteered during his early post-military years, and Jake found himself imagining how his housing designs could connect to existing community infrastructure rather than operating in isolation. That evening, Cameron showed Jake his apartment in the Queen Anne neighborhood, a space that reflected both his Scottish heritage and his American military experience. Books about inclusion policy shared shelf space with family photographs and Cameron's collection of vintage hiking gear. Jake felt comfortable here in a way that surprised him. Not romantic necessarily, but deeply familiar. Cameron cooked dinner, and they talked about expanding their collaboration beyond single projects towards sustainable partnership. Jake received a call from his San Francisco team during dessert. The presentation had been rescheduled, and City Planning Commission members had heard about his Seattle consultation through professional networks. Instead of being frustrated about the delay, they were curious about incorporating workplace inclusion elements into housing policy. "Looks like canceling your flight was the right choice professionally too," Cameron said, refilling Jake's wine glass. They spent the next morning developing a formal partnership proposal. Cameron's consulting firm could expand into housing policy work, while Jake's architectural practice could offer workplace inclusion design services. They identified potential funding sources and client bases, discovering that their combined expertise addressed a gap in the market that neither had recognized individually. The conversation felt simultaneously strategic and intimate, building professional future with personal trust. Jake's return flight to San Francisco was scheduled for late afternoon, but neither man was rushing toward goodbye. They walked through Pike Place Market, buying coffee and watching fishmongers throw salmon for tourists. Cameron mentioned that he traveled to the Bay Area regularly for work, and Jake offered his guest room whenever Cameron needed San Francisco accommodation. The arrangement felt natural, friendship deepening into something neither was quite ready to define, but both wanted to protect. At the airport, their farewell was warmer than a professional handshake, but less dramatic than movie romance. They had built something sustainable, a partnership that could grow over time without pressure or artificial deadlines. Jake boarded his plane carrying Cameron's business card with a handwritten note on the back. "Coffee in the Castro next time I'm in town, looking forward to building something lasting together." 2 weeks later, Jake sent a text that began their ongoing conversation. "Seattle project approved. Housing Summit wants our joint presentation. Ready to change the world, one policy at a time." Their story illustrates how meaningful connections often begin not with romance, but with shared purpose and mutual recognition. When two people discover they're fighting the same battles from different directions and choose to face forward together, they create something stronger than individual effort. Jake and Cameron found each other through crisis and built partnership through collaboration, proving that sometimes the most profound relationships grow from professional respect into personal trust, creating space for both healing and hope. Have you ever found your most meaningful connections through shared work or purpose rather than traditional dating? How do you build trust with someone who understands your professional mission? Subscribe to Heart Stories for more narratives about community building, authentic partnership, and the courage to choose collaboration over competition.